you should be worried, because then there must be a lot of bad parts as well.
If you use frameworks, you will get a lot of pre-made things. Like, let's say you want to make a website and you use WordPress. Then you're kind of locked into the way WordPress does things, and you either have to develop a WordPress plugin or use already existing plugins, and that might not be ideal for what you want to achieve. And, then you have to kind of shop around and see what kind of framework you want to use. And that's the same with if you use a JavaScript framework like React or Vue or what have you. And because then you are kind of forced into following the concept of how you develop in those frameworks.
I ask you some question just from a broader perspective about the frameworks, because some 15 years ago, more or less, I was developing in Java. I've been developing Java Micro Edition and in Java Standard Edition. I didn't use any framework. I don't actually know if there were any at the time. And I was thinking like, gosh, I have to do everything myself with this computer language, the programming language here. There was nothing given. I mean, and I was also thinking, then everybody using Java has to invent various things over and over again. Also at the time, as far as I could see anyway, that there weren't, I mean, the internet wasn't that big at that time. And there wasn't any Google, by the way. So you didn't just go on the internet and try to find whatever packages you needed. You sort of made everything yourself. I don't know. Is Java still like that?
No.
Or do you actually have frameworks now?
There are frameworks. A couple of them actually. So that's not an issue anymore in that case. But the argument is that if you write the code yourself, you can actually write a more lean and optimized application if you know what you're doing, and you can add only those classes and features you actually want and need. But of course, you have to write everything yourself, or maybe do some copy pasting of some existing functionality if you need that. So you're weighing pros and cons, because if you use a framework as well, when the application grows, you're kind of locked into the way the framework is forcing you to work.
It seems to me that there are a lot of non-technical aspects of the choices here, because you sort of implicated that if you write all the code yourself, you get a lean, probably much faster program. However, if you use a framework, you're much more productive as a programmer. So for instance,
at least initially, yes.
So if you got this program you want to sell, you don't want to spend 4 years in programming before you get it on the market. You want to get it out there as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And maybe you would choose to use some framework that would enable you to be highly productive, I would think.
Yeah.
But it's also a question of you have to pay. No, you might have to pay for the framework, but not using the framework will very quickly eat up the same amount of dough in hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a fantastic burn rate the cache the temp program is sitting.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The problem is that if you, I used jQuery as a JavaScript framework. I was happy with that, and now it's discontinued. So I mean, now you got all the code in jQuery, and really it's obsolete, and you have to rewrite it to some other framework, and that's not nice either.
That's not productive either, no.
Yeah.
And those things happens all the time. There are frameworks that go out of fashion, and people change preferences, and all of a sudden you're in a position that where you have a system that is, there's no developers looking at it or using it.
But you see, there is another advantage with the frameworks, which is that you might not understand what it does, but it doesn't matter, because you've got some objects, you've got some methods you can use, you know, and
usually quite good documentation.
Yes, but I mean, for instance, how do you get things in and out of a database anymore? I mean, who's concerned about that? You've got drivers, you've got whatever tools to get that, so you don't have to think about it. Mm-hmm. It's just something that happens for you, and you shouldn't think about it. And there's a lot of other things, and I think, for instance, JavaScript can be very peculiar sometimes.
Yeah, it's a language of its own, kind of.
You know, I've got some books on the shelf down here. I've got one called JavaScript, The Good Parts.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
let's stick to those.
And with the title, but you should be. I mean, you should be worried, because then there must be a lot of bad parts as well.
Isn't that book quite thin compared to the general JavaScript book?
Oh yes, you're right. It's a very, very thin book, and then you've got the general, which is there, if they guess. Yeah, and I suppose that all the stuff in the big book is the bad part, you know.
Yeah, it must be.
Except from yeah, okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's worrying. No, but like for instance, JavaScript, no, jQuery, sorry. There was a lot of things that you could do with jQuery, like transitions and various controls that they had made for you, and worked nice, you know, and you didn't have to think about how do you program a button, for instance, or a list, or because it's not really interesting how to program a list from this perspective, my perspective anyway. What's interesting is to put data in the list.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it's all about.
From my perspective, creating a list is not a complicated thing. And about the transitions and stuff like that, there are a ton of smart things you can do in CSS today that solves a lot of those things that jQuery tried to solve back in the days. So the new CSS3 and HTML5 standards are creating so much help in how to develop nice looking applications.
Well, if you set aside arcane, peculiar, niche programming languages like Dataflex, some of us use it. I mean, what have you really got out there? What are people using? Well, they're using PHP, and they're using JavaScript, and sometimes they use both. And then you've got Java, but how is Java doing these days?
I think in large corporations it's doing quite well. Because they have invested quite a lot in the Java infrastructure and have large applications running in Java.
But if you're going to make a new application somewhere, software.
Yeah.
Would Java be your first choice? Probably wouldn't,
I see.
because everything has to run in browser nowadays.
Yeah, but you have the Java applets that you can run in the browser, and a lot of web components, so that would work, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Java developer, so I'm not sure exactly how it works these days.
Well, I tried it, but I must confess that it was a time in history when the bandwidth were not large enough to run Java applets. I think, although that had the bandwidth been larger some 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't have had JavaScript now, because it wouldn't be necessary.
Should we end at that?
We could do that.
And continue the conversation next Thursday?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, then if you have any questions or comments, don't forget to comment below, and share this video as much as you can, and then see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.